Well, welcome to another session. I hope you are well. And in today's session, I am going to be speaking to the topic of things that do not change. And I'd like to begin with perhaps an old fable, a story. The account of the story says that a frog and a scorpion arrive at the bank of a river. The scorpion is trying to get to the other side, and the frog is about to go in and travel to the other side. And just before the frog jumps in and makes his journey, the scorpion beckons on the frog and says, "Hey, you are a frog, I am a scorpion. We both are trying to get to the other side. In between where we are and where we're trying to get to is water. Unfortunately, I, as a scorpion, I cannot swim. You, on the other hand, a frog, you can swim. So would you do me the honor? Would you be so kind to let me hop on your back? And as you travel across, recognizing that I am very, very light and not heavy, I wouldn't be too much of a burden on you. And you could do me a favor and transport me and yourself to the other side. It would take no more effort from you. Would you please consider my proposal?" The frog thinks about the request and says, "Why would I risk my life by carrying you, Mr. Scorpion, who stings, across the pond and risk being stung and dying in the river or in the pond, whichever?" And the scorpion thinks about it for a few seconds and says, well, hold on. You're making a very valid argument. Your fears are valid. Your concerns are justified. Your worry is not to be discarded. You make a valid point, but with your froggy brain, you're not really thinking properly. If I was to go on your back, and as we travel across the water, I were to sting you, yes, you would die, but so would I. We both would die. I am trying to get to the other side. I'm not trying to get myself killed. Now, the frog thinks about this for a few more seconds and says, Mr. Scorpion has a point. Certainly, nobody plans for their own death by choice. So he says, fine, okay, makes sense. Why don't you hop on my back? And providing you promise me before we begin that I will be safe and you will not sting me, then I will journey across the water and deposit you on the other side safely. The scorpion makes that promise. And lo and behold, the story of the scorpion and the frog began. As they journeyed, sadly, just as the frog feared, the scorpion stung him. Not once, not twice, but 3 times. Now, just as the frog is about to go down and die, he says to the scorpion, "What have you done? You promised me you would not sting me. You promised me you would be true to your word. What have you done? Yes, I am about to die, but so are you. Why did you do this?" And the scorpion says, now this is a classic response. something that people should always keep at heart. Scorpion says, because I am a scorpion. And we stink. That is what we do. So surely, and behold, just as the frog goes down, so does the scorpion go down with him. They both perish. Now, the moral of the story, and the reason I started today's session with that story, is because most of us can relate to fables and stories and things from the past, ideas and allegories and parables, poems, proses. We can relate to things that are memorable. Now, I was taught that particular fable for one reason, and one reason only. Firstly, to understand what you cannot change. But most importantly, to understand that when people show you who they are, believe them, accept them, or accept it, and disavow yourself of the idea of missionary and evangelistic type relationships and dating. Sometimes people are just who they are, and it doesn't matter what words and what promises they make. People break their promises. Now, if you can keep in your mind that people break their promises to human beings, but also break their vows to deities, then it just goes a long way to tell you that the idea of someone's word being his bond is a fairy tale. And I hate to say this, but over the past 70 years, 80 years, as technology developed and as we started getting into the distribution of the television, which was initially for the classes, and it became more so for the masses, what we found was manufacturers and producers, and we found entertainers coming up with a message, a concept. The concept was targeted at the masses, not the classes, because the wealthy people were educated, they were cultured, they were well versed with philosophy and psychology and history and logic and reasoning. And so you might say that the manufacturers and the entertainers and the profiteers could not swindle the wealthy ones. And so as we mass produced technology and television and broadcasting, the masses, generally speaking, and those particularly who perhaps did not have the level of sophistication as the classes, were deceived. Several messages were put forward to encourage people into a new way of thinking. In the United States, we had several businesses: Coca-Cola, Disney, Hallmark. In the UK, we had several. In Australia, there are plenty. In parts of the West, they abound. The message was simply trying to sell you something by appealing to a greater part of you that is kind and sincere and wants and believes that the good ending always prevails. And so people such as myself and yourself, we were sold a dream. We were told that you can have it all. The marriage was supposed to make you happy. The relationships were about having your needs met, and you were supposed to be in blissful happiness. And over the years, from the 40s all the way till present, there's been every decade or so, there is a new a profiteer, someone who comes forward with a new slogan, something to make you feel, and not to cause you to be responsible for your decisions. And unfortunately, we fall for that. Now, let me bring everything I've said so far, swing it all back to relationships. Now, why did I start with that? The concept of blissful happiness is a new age phenomenon. Now, within intersexual dynamics, irrespective of your sex. Happiness was never in the picture. It was never in the equation. Relationships were supposed to be hard. They were also supposed to be boring. Now, I use the word hard not to say success could not be achieved, because finding success is a simple matter and it can be easy, but it was supposed to be hard because of the physical challenges that we faced. Prior to 1940s, the average life expectancy was about 40 years. And before the turn of the 20th century, a family would have 4 or 5 children just to have the possibility that one would survive beyond age 12. Things were difficult. And so people came together and they made the best of a difficult situation. We hadn't manipulated the environment enough to be able to change and alter and modify and actually make life easy. So life was hard in itself, and relationships therefore were simply a derivative. And 2 parties came together to make the best of what could have been a more challenging experience as individuals. Happiness was never supposed to be in the picture. Now, if you were lucky, you had less suffering and less pain and less sorrow than the person next door, and you counted your blessings. At 45, you had lived a great life. At 45, if you were lucky, and only in most parts of the West, maybe less than 30% of people were grandparents. You got married at 20, but sometimes you got married younger. You tried, you had 4, 5, 6, 7 kids, and 70% of those kids died. So maybe you had 1 or 2. And of the 1 or 2 at 25, assuming you had your first child, at 40, 42, 43, your child was trying to have their first child. And they went through the same process. And some of the kids died. So if you were a grandparent, you had won the lottery. And the reason I say all of this is simply because over the past 60, 70 years, a new narrative has come forward, rightly so, because we have developed different technologies that make life easy. We've extended life from 45 years all the way up to 85 years. We've also extended several and provided several developments. The revolution of the genome, the revolution of the biome, various technologies. Infant mortality has been a great form of gifts to human beings. We've minimized infant mortality. People are not dying as they used to back in the day. So life has become easy. Now, what happens, normally speaking, is we take for granted what was sacred, and we become expectant of what was supposed to be novel. So much so that what we do these days is we count our unexpected expectations. We have expectations so much so that we don't understand the basics. Now, in relationships, one of the things that happens, especially, now I'm going to speak from a woman's perspective towards a man. There is almost a list. You ask a woman, what do you want? And she gives you a whole list. And of that list, one of them is, I don't expect you to behave in a certain way. Now we go back to the story of the scorpion and the frog. A woman's looking for, and most women, if you ask, will say, I'm looking for loyalty. Well, strange word, recognizing that loyalty was what men sought from women 60 years ago. But in 2023, things have reversed. Women are saying, I want to find the most attractive man. Again, attraction was something for the woman. I want to find the most accomplished man, the man who has the most resources. I want to find a man who has the ability to protect me at the highest level. I want to find a cultured man. But I want that man who will come up to be perhaps a rarity in society, irrespective of geography. I want him to be loyal to me. Now, forget that we are an extension of the animal kingdom. I want you to behave like no men before you have behaved. Now, this is where, unfortunately, most women get to experience the fable, the story of the frog and the scorpion. Because most men initially will lie. We meet you at the side of the river and we say, listen, I am trying to make it to the other side. And if you would allow me access to your body, access to your emotions, access to your womb, I promise you that I will be faithful and I will be loyal to you, and I will not look to the left or to the right, but I'll keep my eye on the mark, that mark representing you. And most women buy it. And halfway down the line, something happens. The man who started with nothing and who has now suddenly become something, simply by converting his potential to possibility, realizes that his value is much higher. He realizes actually the competition for him, the people competing for his attention, have grown. The balance of power has switched. It's no longer with you, the woman, when you had youth and beauty and purity, and it's moved to him because he has resources. And therefore, he has all these temptations. But the key thing is that all along, he has been depriving himself of something that is a need. Let me not waste any further time and say as follows. Now, ladies can understand something about men if you're humble enough to accept the following. There are some needs that we as men are born with. There are some needs that are seasonal, and there are some needs that are cultivated over time. We develop a palate, a taste for something. Now recognize I did not say wants, I said needs. The scorpion at the bank of the river had an innate need, the need to sting. So for women, understand something. When dealing with a man, don't listen to what he says, because we are very good at telling you what we think you want to hear, and most likely succeeding at convincing you that what you want to hear is something we can deliver. We are very good at that. In many ways, here's an advice for women. When you go on a date, a first date, you should say very little and just ask questions. Here's the reason. A man has an ego. A woman has an ego. A man has an ego need. A woman has an ego need. The wiser of the two parties will always listen to the ego needs of the other party. Will listen to the subconscious need of the person, sometimes uttered through words. If I understand your ego needs, then I only have to feed those ego needs until the gates open. Now let me say that again. A man has an ego. A woman has an ego. Generally speaking, a man's ego is very fragile. In any case, assuming I met you for the first time and we went for a date, as a woman, one of the things you should endeavor to do is be careful about what you share and what you reveal. Here's a good example. Let's assume that there is chemistry, physical chemistry. To start with, the fact you accepted my offer for a date means you find me attractive. So I've met at some level your attractive pre-qualification, prerequisite. During the conversation, I inquire to understand who you are. And if I place you in a comfortable place, intellectually and emotionally, and through the dialogue, you will reveal more than you should. For example, you might say, well, I'm looking to get married within the next 2 years. I'm not looking to play around with anyone. I want a serious relationship. I'm generally looking for someone who has his things or shit together. Someone who has a good job, preferably someone who is in financial investments, someone who is in asset management, perhaps an investment banker, or someone who's perhaps in accounting, the legal side. You define and you present what you want in words. If I'm a chameleon, I simply have to portray myself to be one of those things or all of those things. So I can camouflage myself, recognizing that you've set the boundaries. And for me to get past them into your gate, all I have to do is present back to you your needs in my words. Present myself as that. Remember, as part of the qualification, the frog did not ask the scorpion for any evidence or confirmation that there is no poison in its system, or that what it uses to sting no longer exists. He simply accepted at face value what the frog promised. Similarly, during dating, we are so easy to believe what people say with no evidence, with no verification. Now, in business, it's something we call KYC, know your customer. You have to know something about your customer. Do you know what's sad? We don't even ask for ID cards. We don't ask. We show up and you ask my name and I say, well, my name is whatever I choose. And we are believed. I am stunned at how much most women do not know the men they are dating. Sometimes 6-7 months into the relationship, she's been giving him her emotions, her body, and access to her womb. And she does not know his full name. She does not know because she has not verified the name, and she has not confirmed that he is what he says he is. The man listened to her ego needs, her subconscious needs, her fears, her worries, her doubts, and we capitalize on the information you present on the table. Why? The urge to ejaculate can be so strong that a man will sell the universe he does not own, and a man will promise a world he cannot create just for a taste. That's how strong the need to ejaculate is. We would do anything. We would sell our birthright. We would sell the birthright of the people around us just to taste of the fruit. Now, I say all of this to make a point, which is, it's important for you to come to every interaction with some level of skepticism and understand. And the skeptical position is simply not to say I don't believe, but to go back to fundamental first principles. A man says, I can promise you I'll be faithful to you. Well, here's a good recommendation. I don't think any man can make that promise. And the reason is simple. I don't think any man knows what his actions could be and would be in advance, always. If we did, then we have a crystal ball, which makes us less human. We do not know. We are fallible people. We are broken people. At the wrong time, we fall for temptations. In the wrong place, we give in to temptations. The best thing a man can say to you is that I will do my best to avoid the temptation, not to avoid biting of the fruit, but to avoid being in the place, or to avoid being weak. As a matter of fact, usually, if you go through biblical theology, or if you go through any form of religious theology, and if you go through history, and if you go through any form of historical accounts, whether military history or general history, the vulnerable periods in a man's life or in a person's life is usually when temptation comes in. Temptation does not come in when you're strong, because you can defend yourself against what you know you should not have. It comes when you're weak and you cannot fight. When you've actually allowed yourself to be vulnerable. Alcohol, drugs, whatever reduces that power of you that protects you from right and wrong, we all fail. The right man says to the woman, I can't make you that promise because I don't have the future in my hands. What I can promise you is that I will do my best. And that is the best you should ask for. Now, women who are not very sophisticated demand such promises. And they believe in this loyalty until they come into the awareness that men are always men. We are an extension of the animal kingdom. Now, this brings me to perhaps where I will close today's session, which has to do with infidelity, cheating, and him looking elsewhere. The way we define infidelity and cheating varies in the West, but it's wrong. If you consolidate all of the ways they're defined, they are mostly wrong. And here's the reason. If you start from the basis that we are animals, and in the animal kingdom, if you look at our closest relatives, the idea of monogamy, it's really a westernized concept. It doesn't really exist with the exception of one or two animals and perhaps one mammal. But it's a Western concept. Now, it doesn't mean I don't subscribe to the idea. Of course I do, because that's how you civilize men and you make men more responsible. But more importantly, that's how you keep the structure of and the balance of a society together. Because if 5% or 10% of all the men get 90% of all the women, then you have 90% of the men without women, and therefore they become frustrated and they overturn the system when they get frustrated. So there is an element of saying some of that spoil has to be distributed. How it's distributed, I'm not smart enough to decide. In any case, it's unusual. Across time, across geography, across history, across seasons, for men to be generally loyal to one woman and one woman only. Those who succeed in that process do so because they have a very acute awareness of their fallibility and how weak they are. So they put defenses in place to stop them from being in the garden where the fruit exists. Or they put in place structures, devices that effectively call to the attention of people who are supposed to protect them, gatekeepers, to ensure they don't fall prey. We're human beings. Wrong place, right person, magic happens. Wrong time, right person, magic happens. We don't know. What we can say is that we will do our best. In any case, it's important for women to come to the acceptance, not the acceptance firstly that men are animals. At the core, we are an extension of the animal kingdom. So to expect men to behave like angels is a far cry. Sometimes it's asking for too much. In many sessions ago, I did a session where I talked about you have to learn how to speak to the conscience in him. And you choose a man not based on his promises to you, but based on the level of his conscience. So men who have a strong enough conscience will choose to abstain when the opportunities are presented before them. Men who have not developed that part of their nature might fall, not because they intentionally want to do so, but because they're not experienced. Now, a journey of a man begins with a test of three things: your loins, your desire for power and fame, and the finer part. So effectively, the loins means sex. Can you control sex? And then your thirst, which is an appetite, whatever that appetite might be. Your loins, power, fame, or money, and your appetite. And for young men who have not been disciplined in how to manage that process, fall short of the mark at the first hurdle. Now, the most important thing to consider is, and I make these statements to friends that I have that are female, and sometimes they don't get it. But let me leave it with you because I think it's important. If a man is not 35 yet, I think you should take with a pinch of salt all of his promises. 40 and above, you're more likely to get, say, 70 or 80% truth from men. 30 and below, and the younger he moves towards 18, whatever you've been told, those promises will be broken. And here's the reason. A woman is born with her value intact. You come pre-qualified, pre-assembled, partly because what men are looking for in a woman primarily have to do with her beauty, her attractiveness. Both of them come in terms of visual. Secondly, her purity, and therefore her chastity and reproductive ability. That has to do with her ability to bring into the world his seed. Number 3, the ability to pair bond with you. And that has to do with your attitude, your character, your upbringing, the lack of traumas in your life, especially relational traumas. That's what men judge women based on. But the first is the most important. We judge based on what we see. We actually judge based on what we see, and we use visuals as a heuristic for judging the other two. Wrongly, but men do that. So when we look at a woman who's got hair, thick hair, it's a sign of good health. Wide hips is a sign that she can bring to term a baby. There's several physical attributes of a woman that we use to judge as to whether she will be a good mate. The way she dresses and walks and carries herself, her gait, tells us whether she will be able to pair bond with us in union, both from a vision, mission, principles, etc. We definitely make a mistake, but by using the visual cue, it's a heuristic, it's a shortcut. Now the reason I say this is simply because it means that women generally have the most of what men want the younger they are. 18, you're ripe. Between 18 and 25, you're at the peak of your hotness. Beauty, youth, fertility, therefore, you're the most attractive. In many ways, you hold the power. A man who is 30 years and who's a millionaire, if you were comparing what both of you bring to the table, and you're 22 or 23 and a virgin, your value exceeds his value. So the balance of power is with you, the woman. Hence, women don't understand because they haven't had to work for that value. It was given to you. The men, on the other hand, if you took a man who was 22 and a woman who was 22, she far outweighs him in the value proposition or the value exchange, because all he has is potential. Men are not judged based on our beauty and youth and chastity and all that other nonsense. We are judged as resource objects. Now what this simply means is that the younger he is, the less resources he has, or whatever derivative of that resource, money, power, wealth, influence, fame, he has less of it the younger he is, except he has come from a wealthy family, but because he hasn't had the time to convert potential to reality. Now what this simply means is the younger he is, the less you should believe what he says. So if you're 22 and he is 24, to give you guys a 2-year age gap, he's more likely to tell you what you want to hear because you are the one who holds the power. He feels lucky to have you, and he is, because your value far exceeds, your value exchange far exceeds his value proposition. We go 5 years into the future. You were 27 and he is now 29. The balance of power is still tilted on your favor. Perhaps, who knows, 60-40 or 66-39. The power is still yours. But once he gets to 35, you were 33. You've crossed 30. Assuming both of you are unmarried, the balance of power has so swayed in his favor that he's now at the peak of what, not just the peak, he's at the starting point of the peak of his potential. But most importantly, he's desirable now. He's had from 24 to 35 to create something of himself, to convert that potential to reality, and he has results. But most importantly, he has had the opportunity to fail. Fail in several things in life, and therefore he's not moved by the idea of what I call shiny things. Because there will be shiny things. At 35, you were 33, 2 year of an age gap. But women who are 22, 10 years your junior, desire him. Why? At 22 years old and him at 35, the value proposition and value exchange are just about equal. They make a perfect match. So you are competing to keep your man away from women who are 22, who you cannot compete with from a physical perspective, in beauty, in purity, in chastity, in age. Now, all things remaining equal, always. So, as a woman, as you journey from 22 to 32, you have to start letting go of all of his promises about being faithful, being loyal, and you have to start recognizing that even he cannot make that promise. Why? He has options. Like someone who has been working for a startup. Imagine you started working for Tesla, early days, and Elon Musk said to you, well, we don't have any money. So all of the funds we've raised from equity investors have to be invested in the technology. I will give you stock options. I will give you a number of shares that you must hold for the next 10 years. But in 10 years' time, I believe this company will be great. And then you can cash some of those options. So you have what's called a vesting period. 10 years you have to wait. But you have all the stock options or restricted stock option units. 10 years. At the time he offered you that, it's worth nothing. If you took that money to the marketplace and said, would you buy Tesla shares? I have 10,000 stock options. People would say, no, it's likely going to fail and it would amount to zero. Actually, as a matter of fact, for every £1 I give you for your stock options, I might get back less than zero. So people say no. But as you wait, as the company starts to convert its potential to actuality, suddenly each of those options are worth £1,000, £2,000, and now you have value. That's the same principle. The younger a man is, all he has is potential. As he converts his potential, he then has value, convertible value. But his promise of being faithful cannot be made when it's worth nothing. That promise has to be made when he's worth a lot. Which is why you notice and you see that when men get to about 35 and are going into the marketplace to choose a woman, generally speaking, they do not choose women who are 33. They tend to choose women who they believe provide a comparable value exchange. They want the younger women. All things remaining equal, because they feel that's a comparable exchange. So the older your husband is or your partner is, and especially the more an age gap you have between both of you, the more believable his promise of being faithful. The more believable that as you journey through or across the pond, you will not get stung. Now here's the key thing. At 35, his stock options, his restricted stock units are worth a lot. Now he has all those women around him. The question is, will he exercise the vesting of all those stock options? Now he doesn't have to vest all of them, but would he vest a few of them? Would he say, well, do you know what, I'm going to sell about 2% of my stocks and make some money? That is the same thing as him seeing another woman as attractive. He still remains with you, but every now and then he might invest some extra stocks, just for fun. Now you have a choice to make. Do you believe his promise from a decade earlier? Or do you just accept that boys will be boys, men will be men, and you take with some level of decorum, what he tells you and the promises he makes? As a matter of fact, my advice to women is, when men start making promises, stop them. Here is perhaps one of the best tactics. A man starts to make you promises that he will not cheat. Apply the principle that Jesus applied on Peter. He said, "Oh, Peter, you should not have said that." Remember, Peter says, "I will be with you, I will die with you, I will never leave your side." And Jesus said, no, Peter, you should not have said that. Because now you will be tested. And just so you know, before the cock crows, you will deny me 3 times. And surely, as the Lord lived, Peter denied his master 3 times, and the cock crowed. The point being, we have a physical side, we have a spiritual side. When men speak from the place of love, sometimes they speak in the language of spirit, which is love, but they forget that they are physical beings. When a man starts to promise his faithfulness and his loyalty, you have to stop him and say, let me promise you something. I am 25. You were 30 years old. Before you turn 40, you will betray me twice. Before you turn 50, you will betray me 5 times. That does more. That does more on his conscience, to remind him of his words. Now here's the key part of that whole conversation. The time will come. He will come to his Garden of Gethsemane, no doubt. He will be tested 100%. But when the test comes, the question is, does he cry and weep afterwards? Or does he say, get away from me? Man shall not live by beautiful women alone, and beautiful bosoms, and beautiful breasts, and faces, and hips, and man shall not live by that alone, but by the word and the love that comes from my wife, mistress, lover, etc. Would he say one or two of both? Or would he say, Father, forgive me for I have sinned, and I am but flesh? Now let me bring today's session to a close as follows. If you keep in mind that there are some needs that we have as men that we are born with, and there are some needs that are seasonal, and there are some needs we cultivate. A woman, all you should do is spread your time intelligent. Don't try to make him less of a scorpion. Scorpions stink. That's a need he was born with. Focus on the needs that are cultivated by taste, because you can control and you can influence that taste. And focus on the needs that are seasonal. A seasonal need will come and it will go. You never make a permanent decision on temporary, seasonal issues. You wait for the season. As long as there is heaven and earth, there will be seed time and harvest time. A time to sow and a time to reap. Time, seasons, and years. Seasons will come and go. You overlook the seasonal variations. You try to minimize them, but you overlook them. The cultivated needs, that you can influence, that you can control. Now I hope this has been an insightful session.